Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another dev vlog. Today we have none other than Rich Harris with us. Hello, Rich.
Hey,
How's it going?
hey, how are you?
I'm very good. It's super hot over here in Stockholm at the moment. We've got 20 degrees Celsius. Ooh,
Well, it's absolutely
almost boiling.
apocalyptic over here in New York. We have or had at least last night, I don't know if it's cleared up a little bit, but the worst air quality of any major city in the world.
Oh, sounds like
Yeah, all
I
the
would
smoke
not want
from
to
the
be there.
wildfires coming down from Quebec and smothering the city.
Ah, right. So it's not like regular car pollution.
Yeah. That's not
Yeah.
why I'm all blurry though. I'm blurry because I can't work out how to use my camera.
Next time it'll be probably be sorted, hopefully.
Yeah,
For
maybe.
now, even though your face is very beautiful, that's not the focus of today, right? We're probably going to talk a bit about Svelte.
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
I just need
bef
to do a little tweet to say that everyone should come and hang out here.
all right, great. In the meantime, I'll ask the audience how are the audio levels? Are we sounding okay? Silence.
Silence. That's a good thing, unless it's a very
Yeah,
bad thing.
I think they can hear us. Hopefully.
Yeah,
Um,
I think we're good.
yeah, audio's fine. Great.
Let's get into it.
Uh, Yeah. So what's been what's cooking in this felt world? What have you been up to?
What I have been up to, not a whole lot. I've just been standing back and letting the magic happen. There's been some frenetic activity over the last couple of weeks, and we have a Svelte 4 beta release out in the wild. Yeah, it's
Nice.
very exciting.
Yep.
We're very close to having a stable Svelte 4 release, and it's not a huge change from Svelte 3. It's mostly just tidying up a few odds and ends and sort of clearing the path for some future developments. But we would love for people to try it out and give us feedback on if there are any unexpected breakages, things that we need to know. Um, Maybe we should talk about
All right.
what's changed.
Yeah, let's do it. So what has changed?
All
I
right,
know
so
we've been talking about node versions a lot, right?
we have. So let me share my screen, and then we can talk through the migration guide first of all, and then maybe I'll do a quick demo.
Sounds good.
All right. So this is a draft of the migration guide that we're going to put on the website soon. We're working on a new website as well, which I'll talk about more in a little bit.
Yep. Can
Um,
you can you increase the font size a bit?
Indeed, I can.
Thank
So
you.
I'm just going to talk through these breaking changes first, and then we can talk about some of the new features. So first of all, Node version, we are dropping Node 14 support because Node 14 is ancient history, been out of long-term support for a long time now. So you're going to need to use Node 16 with Svelte, just like you do with Svelte Kit. Number two, the Webpack version. If you're on Webpack, then you will need to upgrade to version 5 or higher. But really, the migration guide is stop using Webpack.
Yeah, I was going to ask who is using Webpack for Svelte.
I mean, there's a few holdouts still, but
Yeah.
come on,
All right. Fair enough.
2023.
Yeah.
Um, Most of these items are kind of like basic stuff that you're not really going to need to think about. Browser conditions for bundlers. Um, I guess this means that we only support the current versions of major bundlers. Like I know that until recently, Parcel didn't support export conditions properly. I think, but as long as you're using the latest versions of stuff, it should all be fine. Veep plugin Svelte. Also, you're going to need to use a more up-to-date version of Veep plugin Svelte. We recommend that you upgrade to TypeScript 5. Recommend that you do that anyway. Comes with a whole bunch of advancements. 5.1 is much faster than 5.0. 5.0 has features that 4.9 doesn't have. So just upgrade your TypeScript version. Some stuff that we've removed in Svelte 4. So when Svelte 3 came out, people were still using CommonJS. And that meant that we needed to output Svelte components as CommonJS modules. So even though you would author using ES6 style imports and everything, it would convert that into CommonJS modules. That's really not necessary anymore. The way that it did it was a little bit hacky, and there were always odd things that didn't quite translate between the two module formats. We've just got rid of that, because if you're using Svelte, you're doing so via a build tool that understands native JavaScript modules. So there's really no need to support CommonJS output anymore.
Right.
As a corollary to that, there used to be a thing called the Svelte register hook. So you'd import this in your app, and then you could require Svelte components directly inside a Node program, and it would just compile them on the fly, which was a convenient way to do simple tests, and in some cases to do server-side rendering, although it was really never recommended for production use. And it's just easier to not have that. It's not very useful. You should be bundling your Svelte components in order to test them. And if you're using something like vtest, then it will just kind of do that on the fly for you. So we no longer support the Svelte register hook. So if you're one of the dozen or so people who actually uses that, please stop. Some stricter types for Svelte functions, just buttoning up things like the type signatures for create event dispatcher. Like, it will now yell at you if you, when you create your event dispatcher, if you pass in a generic argument that tells the dispatcher what types of arguments are valid with which events, it will yell at you if you don't pass an argument that is required, or if you do pass an argument when none is expected, or if the argument is the wrong type, stuff like that.
Makes sense.
Nothing groundbreaking, but it's just going to make your apps a little bit more type safe. Custom element output has been overhauled. I'm not going to go into all of the details here, but there's a pull request that details everything.
Yeah, I think so. So last month, me and Simon talked about this in particular. So if you want to see like what that was all about, you can go check that devlog out, or the PR probably.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of changes there. Svelte component typed, always a bit of a weird thing. It's just Svelte component now.
Yeah.
Transitions. Okay, so this actually might go easier if I bring up a little demo page here. Let me.
Yeah, this inverts a current thing, right? Like it default gets switched, kind of.
So I'm gonna show you a little demo project. So I've just installed Svelte at latest, in other words, Svelte 3 into this project. Yep, good reminder. Start up my dev server. Put this over to one side. And here we go. So let's imagine that I have a Boolean called foo and a Boolean called bar. And then I'll add some toggles for these. Foo input type equals checkbox. Check equals foo. I'll duplicate that for bar. Okay, now perhaps I have an if foo block, and inside that I have an if bar block, and inside that I have a paragraph element.
All right.
And then I'm going to add a transition to that paragraph element. Import fade from Svelte transition. Slap down there. Transition fade. And now if I make both of these true, then you'll see that
increase the font size
bigger. you see that that paragraph is fading in and out, and it fades in and out whether it's bar that goes from true to false or foo that goes from true to false. In practice, what we've found is that most of the time that's not actually what you want. What you want is for the transition to occur when there's a local state change. What I mean by that is you only want the paragraph to fade in and out when bar is changing, not when foo is changing. And you can do that in Svelte 3 with this local modifier. You add that, and then now, and bar changes, fades in and out, but when foo changes, it just appears and disappears. In Svelte 4,
is this where? Sorry. So a common place where people get this run into this is when you're transitioning pages in SvelteKit, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So
maybe that's where you were going.
Yeah, because of the way that transitions work, it won't actually take the element out of the DOM until the transitions have completed. And in fact, it won't take any elements out of the DOM until all current transitions have completed that are associated with a specific state change. And so that means that if you have a transition somewhere on your page, like a little menu item fades in and out or something, then once you navigate, that transition is going to prevent everything from leaving the DOM, which means that you'll have two pages rendered simultaneously, the old page and the new page, which is obviously no good. So a better default, we think, is to have transitions be local by default. So I'm just going to install Svelte 4, which I did by installing Svelte at next. And now we can get rid of that, and it will still behave locally here, but then, oh, hang on a minute. I guess I need to restart web server. But this time it's just going to fade in and out when we toggle foo, but not when we toggle bar. By the way, this is probably a good time to mention that if you want to migrate your stuff automatically from Svelte 3 to Svelte 4, you can do so with npx svelte migrate Svelte 4. And it's going to update everything. So because that transition was previously global, it now thinks we need to add the global modifier to undo the local modification. If, on the other hand, we had a local modifier before and then we ran the migration,
it'll remove it, right?
It would. Oh, it actually doesn't remove it. I thought it would.
Okay.
Well, it could do.
So the local modifier is removed, right? It doesn't exist anymore, or
it looks like it does still exist, but it's implicit. It's the default. So if you add it, then it won't do anything. But if you don't add it, then it will be as if you had added it.
Right. But the global one, that's a new thing.
Yes, the global modifier is new. Exactly.
Yep.
So that's one of the fairly few actual behavior changes to Svelte 4. Let's take a look at the rest of the migration guide. Stores will now error if you have a derived store that takes in a bunch of values. If one of those values is not a store, if it's falsy, then Svelte will throw an error. Previously, it would treat that as a store that had a value of undefined, which I guess we thought that was helpful to be sort of generous in what you accept. But
so
in practice, it just caused confusion.
Would that mean that like it wasn't a store at all? It was just undefined. I guess that's what you said. You said a falsy value that wasn't a store.
Let's see if I can
here.
Demo this real quick. So let's say you have a equals writable, const b equals another writable, and then you have a derived, which is derived from A and B, and it takes in those numbers and adds them.
Yep.
reference that store value like so. Okay, so C is 3, 1 plus 2. But if instead of B being a store, it was something faulty like undefined.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Then it's still going to try and run this code. It's still going to try and add these values. It's going to turn this into a store with a value of undefined, which actually not that helpful in practice. So in Svelte 4, just install that and start it up. You can see it's actually giving us an error immediately. So we can diagnose like how we ended up passing the faulty value into that call.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's another thing. Like if you were relying on the behavior for some reason, that has changed, and you will need to update your code accordingly. Lost my mouse. Back to the tab. Okay. Custom store implements. I actually think this is slightly incorrect. There's a very technical reason why there's a breaking change around custom store implementations. It doesn't affect you if you're using custom stores, if that makes sense.
So if you're actually building them from the ground up.
Yeah, it's essentially. So what it is that if you have const my readable store equals readable, and we start with a specific value, and then we set the value periodically. So in here, perhaps you would add a mouse move listener and then set the value to the current mouse coordinates. And that way you can get the mouse coordinates, but you can't set the value of the store because that wouldn't make any sense because it's a read-only thing, mouse coordinates.
Right. Yep.
But there are some things where setting it isn't the most sensible thing to do. What you actually want to do is update the store based on its current value. Right. So think of, I don't know, I'm struggling to think of a useful example off the top of my head, but you can now do this inside your readable. This will take the current value and update it. And you can imagine having that inside like a set interval or something like that.
Yep.
The breaking change here is that if you implemented this function yourself for some reason,
right. Okay.
using the same interface that the built-in readable implementation uses, this start-stop notifier thing, that interface has changed. And so in semantic versioning terminology, this is a breaking change, but in practice, it's not. So that was an unnecessary deep dive into something that affects approximately 0 people.
Yeah, I know you said you were gonna gloss over it. I couldn't keep myself from asking. Sorry.
I did not gloss over it. Default slot bindings. All right, so this is a bit of an odd one. So let's say I have a component over here.
Default slot
how do I demonstrate this? So slot x equals 1, slot name equals, sorry, name equals foo equals 2, oops. And then we'll save that as thing.svelte. I'm just going to get rid of all of this junk. Import thing from sometimes Copilot gets the wrong idea
here.
Yeah. So the way that you access stuff from the child component here is with the let binding. And for the default slot, you can do let x. So X is 1, passing in 1 from that slot element. If we have another element, let's call it P slot equals foo, let Y, then we can do the same thing for that. Right, X is 1, Y is 2.
Yep.
Now, what's super messed up is that in Svelte 3, and this was never intentional, this was just a bug. You could also access Y here.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and right, this will now give you a Y is not defined error, but in Svelte 3 that would work. Similarly, if this was an element that it contained both of these, it would let you reference the default bindings inside the named slots. Which sort of looks like it should work, because you think in terms of lexical scope. Like we have this, we're sort of declaring the variable here, and it kind of feels like you should be able to access it inside here. But they're not really nested. Even though they look nested, they're not. The default slot and the named slot are actually siblings. And so we used to let you access the default bindings inside the named slots because of that, the appearance of having that lexical scope. But in practice, it turns out that if you have multiple iterations of the default slot, for example, then the behavior very quickly becomes hard to define in a way that is unambiguously correct. So we've just tightened that up. You now need to be explicit about what you're passing into your slots and what you reference, which I think is a nice improvement.
Question then. So is it possible to nest slots? Like, can you have a named slot inside of a default slot? Probably can.
No,
right?
Okay. No, that wouldn't really make sense, I don't think. Yeah.
All right. Yep.
Preprocessors. So the preprocessor API has been tightened up just a little bit. In the vast majority of cases, it won't affect anything, but the order in which things happen has changed. Previously, it would do all of the markup preprocessors first, and then it would do the script preprocessors, and then it would do the style preprocessors. So if you had an array of preprocessors instead of just one, which, perhaps you've got one that does some SAS conversion, and you've got another that does TypeScript or whatever. Previously, each of those preprocessors would have these 3 mini preprocessors inside, one that converts the entire component into something that's more standard, and then one that runs for your script element, and then one that runs for your style element. And it would do, so say you had the SAS one and the TypeScript one, it would do the SAS markup preprocessor and then the TypeScript markup preprocessor, and then it would come back and do the SAS style preprocessor and the TypeScript preprocessor, and then it would come back and do the style and style, or the scripts and scripts. I forget the specific order. And in that case, it wouldn't matter, because the SAS preprocessor and the TypeScript preprocessor are doing independent things, and it doesn't matter how they interact. But in some cases, you might have preprocessors that really needed to run in sequence, and doing the markup, script, style thing was just a little bit weird and hard to predict. So now it's markup, script, style, markup, script, style.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Makes a lot more sense.
That's how I would expect it to work, at least.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why it ever worked the other way. It's just one of those things that we were stuck with because of Semver, but now that we're doing a breaking change, we can shake off all of those old mistakes, which is nice.
Awesome. So we have people asking about this this migration gist. Is that something you want to share now, or are we going to wait for a more?
This is something that we are going to put on the website when we release the updated website, which we can talk about in just a moment. Mm-hmm. We are changing some implementation details. When you have a thing like a class, whatever, on your element, you can't have that on a component, sorry.
Ironically, someone asking about this earlier in the stream. When are we getting class? When are we going to be able to pass classes to components? Which is a discussion that's been going on for years.
Yeah, that'll never end.
Let's not open that can of worms.
Yeah. So if this value were to toggle, then internally what Svelte 3 does is it toggles the class in a slightly inefficient way. And it's not something that you're going to notice really, but if you had a very large number of classes that were all being changed in that way, then there is a very tiny performance downside to it. But because we're in 2023 and because we can rely on certain APIs that we couldn't rely on when Svelte 3 came out, we can now use the built-in class list.toggle with the name of the class, X, followed by the value, which in this case is false. In Internet Explorer, that didn't used to work because it didn't accept the second argument. So it would always just toggle it from the opposite of whatever it was previously.
Right.
So that doesn't work. But now we can use that in every browser, and it just makes that operation just microscopically faster. The downside is that if for some reason you are supporting Internet Explorer or Chrome 22 or whatever the hell, then you will need to use a classless polyfill. So again, technically a breaking change, although in practice, something that is not going to affect anyone. And that's kind of the theme for a lot of this stuff. We're just tidying things up, getting rid of some old code that we don't need anymore, just making the whole thing a little bit nicer. The final thing on the migration list, which is a checklist of all of the breaking changes. It's not a list of all of the changes. Now, if you have an element that is transitioning out of the DOM, we add the inert HTML attribute to it, which means that you're not going to accidentally click on it. This is better for screen readers and stuff like that, because you no longer have multiple copies of elements in the DOM. Semantically, once you're removing an element with a transition, then it shouldn't appear in the accessibility tree anymore. It's just a visual thing. And that's something that we didn't do before, but now we do. I don't know. Maybe there's some very contrived situation in which that constitutes a breaking change.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say, like, that doesn't sound very much like a breaking change, but I guess if someone is, I don't know.
So that's all of the annoying breaky stuff that we just want to like make everyone aware of. I should talk a little bit about some of the new stuff that we're getting. And there's not a lot. It's as I say, it's mostly a drop-in replacement. But one thing that you couldn't do in Svelte 3 that you can do in Svelte 4 is use iterables in each blocks. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to put Svelte 3 back in this project. Yeah,
I feel like people have been asking for this for years now. So it's nice to finally see it.
All right, so let me give you an example. Perhaps we have a map, and we'll do map set 1, and then maybe Copilot is going to just do the work for me. Come on, give me a 3. Oh, there we go. Come on, and a 4. Sometimes it needs a little coaxing. Sometimes it'll just do the whole lot. And
yeah. Did you see this is a total tangent, but did you see the Google Bard thing where someone asked for JSON? No. Okay.
No,
so someone was asking Google Bard for JSON and nothing but JSON, no words before or after.
Oh yeah, and it had to like threaten to kill someone. Oh my god.
It's funny that it actually like did it in the end. When you actually threaten someone, you're like, okay, I guess I'll follow the instructions. Oh,
yeah, I don't know if I'm more worried that was the outcome, or if like if it didn't care that someone was going to get.
Yeah. Sorry.
Right, so
continue.
So you might try and do something like this. And then if we fire up the dev server, take a look. It's not showing us an error when it tries to server-side render this, which is honestly kind of bad that, that we
yeah, it
didn't.
should.
Like, whoops. But if you open it in the browser, then you get this error saying each only iterates over array-like objects. You can use a spread to convert this iterable into an array. And if you're not sufficiently steeped in JavaScript to know what that means, what it's saying is that you can do this,
Yeah,
and it'll work as you would expect. Right? All well and good, but it's kind of
that seems like a roundabout way of doing things.
You can't. It's called an iterable. You should be able to iterate over it. So, Svelte next. Oops. Typing live, not my strength. In Svelte 4, we can get rid of that ceremony, and we can just use any. So you see the language tools that I've got running here. Haven't figured this out yet, but all that'll be squared away. You can now just use iterables, not just maps, not just sets, but anything that implements the iterable protocol. You can use inside an each block, which just a nice little quality of life improvement.
Yep. So we're having, there's a question in here about, so will we have TypeScript types support inside HTML-like template parts of Svelte? So I'm guessing they're asking if we get proper TypeScript support in the HTML, not just the script tag. Probably not for Svelte 4, right?
Probably not for Svelte 4.0. Let's just say that, like, we're actively talking about this. We've had lots of conversations about what the best way to do this would be. So for anyone who's not sure what we're talking about here, essentially we want to be able to specify types inside inside our expressions here. Or, you can imagine that inside an event handler, if you have like a whole bunch of JavaScript inside your template, then inside a function, you might want to declare some types. And at the moment, that's not possible. You can only have JavaScript inside the curly braces. And there is a reason for that. The reason is that we're using Acorn under the hood to parse the contents of those curly braces, and Acorn has this really useful method called parse expression at. And you set it off. You say start parsing from this character in this block of code, and then keep going until you can no longer parse a valid JavaScript expression. And then we do that, see where we get to, and then that's the end of the expression. Like, then we know that we should be expecting a curly brace.
Right.
If we don't do that, because we're not able to rely on the contents of that being JavaScript, then how do we know when the expression ends? How do we know when the end curly brace is? And the answer is we kind of can't. You can sort of approximate it. You can say, well, your brackets need to be balanced. Like you keep going until, if you see another opening curly, then you need to see a closing curly before the one that marks the end of the expression. And then once you've got that, you can say, okay, great, this is my expression. I can pass that off to my preprocessor or whatever it is. But you actually can't do that, because what if your expression contains a string? If you have the opening curly brace inside a string, well, that shouldn't need to be balanced. And you might think, well, okay, we can account for strings. They're all just things inside quotes. But what about regular expressions? What if it's something that isn't JavaScript or TypeScript like at all? And it turns out to be a really hard problem unless you know exactly what kind of grammar you accept inside those curly braces. So the idea of being able to accept anything inside curly braces is probably not realistic. But we have thought, what if we made an exception for TypeScript? What if Svelte understood TypeScript natively? And that is probably not something that we're going to do right away. But given the prevalence of TypeScript, given the importance of TypeScript in the ecosystem, it's definitely something that we're thinking about.
Yeah. So would that mean that you would basically have to write a new Acorn that does TypeScript?
No, there is an Acorn TypeScript plugin,
Oh.
which allows it to work. But we don't just want to add that and then move on, because that opens some interesting questions about, well, should we also be supporting
Right.
TypeScript natively inside script tags? And if we do that, then we need to make other aspects of language tools aware of that, and it adds a whole lot of complexity. Like realistically, if you're supporting TypeScript inside Svelte, then maybe the Svelte compiler needs to depend on TypeScript, and it just opens a can of worms that we don't want to get into at this stage, because it would hold up the release of Svelte 4. We think it's something that we can add down the road if we decide to.
All right.
Oh, excuse me.
Oh, apparently, sorry. I apparently have some robot noises.
You're a little
Android. Let me rejoin 1 second.
Yeah, I mean, compared to what you sounded like during the Svelte Summit, this is nothing.
Well, give me 1 second.
All right. So I guess next it would be worth talking a little bit about some of the internal changes that we're working on for Svelte 4. Part of the reason that that we've done all this is because the Svelte 3 code base is built with a lot of 2019 era assumptions that make it a little bit difficult to work with. And you've probably heard us talk about the conversion from TypeScript to JavaScript, which is something that I'm personally quite excited about. It means that the package is going to be a hell of a lot smaller. In fact, maybe we can demonstrate this. If I just remove my node modules and my lock file, if I install Svelte using npm.
Is the audio fine now?
Yeah, you sound buttery smooth.
Awesome.
Right, let's open node modules.
Ooh,
and have a look at Svelte. If I just look at the information there. Okay, so you can see that this is 3 megabytes. I don't think I can zoom this window in, unfortunately, but this is 3 megabytes or 4.4 megabytes on disk. If we now install Svelte at next and try that again. Oh, no effect whatsoever. Hang on, let me just get rid of all of that. Try once more. Well, this is disappointing. I'm not sure.
It's too small; they can't see it. Just make a number up.
I have no idea why is it installing the wrong thing, or what's going on here. What I was hoping to be able to show you is that Svelte 4 is much smaller than Svelte 3. I'm going to try this one more time because there must be something that I've mucked up here. There we go.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So Svelte 3 is 11.5 megabytes on disk. Svelte 4 is 4.5 megabytes on disk, and that is going to get reduced quite a bit further as well because of a couple of changes. One, we managed to persuade one of our dependencies to drop a ridiculously bloated comparison library in favor of one created by our very own Luke Edwards, which is not only tiny and doesn't have a whole shitload of useless dependencies, but it's also way faster. So that's going to shave off a few hundred kilobytes from the dependency size, if not more.
That's a lot.
Yeah. It's really worth paying attention to the the crap that you have in your dependencies, because like there are some rogue open source maintainers out there who have some very strange ideas about the right way to write code. And if you can just ban them from your dependency graph, then you're going to have a better time. And so that's what we've done. But
So
there's another. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, to be clear, this is only for the actual node modules. It's not for the end app, right? So just so people understand.
Well, yeah,
it's not gonna,
that won't affect the. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Continue.
Yeah, I think I'm actually not sure if there's going to be a significant change in bundle size as a result of Svelte 4. It's not going to get bigger, but I'm not sure if there's like a substantial reduction or anything like that. I mean, the fact that we're writing directly in JavaScript instead of in TypeScript, I think theoretically means that like we're not including any of the TypeScript compatibility code. Like I know that sometimes when you use TypeScript, it's converting modern syntax into old syntax. Although I don't think we're doing that in Svelte 3, so I'm not sure. But in general, just authoring in JavaScript means that you don't have to worry about stupid shit like that. Another change which hasn't yet been merged into the version 4 branch, but which is going to reduce the package size further, is around the type generation. And for that, I need to give you a whole another demo of how things work today and how they'll work in future. So we have, I'm just going to reload the window to make sure that TypeScript is using the current. Oh no, we have Svelte 3 installed right now, don't we? So let me just install. Get rid of the npm stuff and use pnpm, and we're going to install Svelte at next.
Yep. So we have a question about the size here. So is that going to affect dev development / building of the final app? Like
No.
The size reduction? No.
I mean, so if there is a size reduction because we're using JavaScript instead of TypeScript, then yes, that will obviously impact your bundle size. But no, this is all about reducing the time that it takes to install Svelte, both when you're setting up a project and when you're building your project in CI or when you deploy your project. It's going to take less room on disk and just generally be less bloaty. Like because we're using JavaScript, we no longer need to ship source maps, for example. Source maps take up a lot of space when you have your entire code base being converted from TypeScript to JavaScript.
That's
okay. So today, if you do something like you start typing on mount because you want to use that inside your component, then you can see here I've actually got 2 on mounts in the autocomplete dropdown. And the first one that it's giving me, Svelte /internal, is the wrong one. And hang on.
Yeah, that's not the one I want to use.
I did that. Menu disappeared. There we go. Oh, for fuck's sake! There's the VS Code does different things every time you run it.
Yeah,
so,
I agree.
Yeah, I don't know why it's suddenly decided that it's not going to autocomplete anything. Let's just like reloading the page.
Maybe you need to reload the language server. I think there's an option for there.
Maybe
VS Code.
but now the whole thing is just. Oh, you can see it's doing something down here.
Ah, yeah.
Deactivate Copilot. Is that what's going on? I'm just going to quit VS Code and restart it. Let's try this once more.
Yeah, VS Code is honestly quite finicky sometimes.
Yeah,
I feel like.
And it decides to throw the biggest hissy fits whenever you're
live,
trying to demonstrate something.
All right.
Okay, so this time around, it's not even giving me any auto completion whatsoever, which is really weird. Like ordinarily, this just works. No idea what's happened. But you saw that it was pointing to Svelte /internal, which is a package inside the Svelte poly package that we need to expose because components rely on it. They pull in items from the internal Svelte library and then they use it to manage themselves. But it's not something that is considered public API. You shouldn't be able to access it. And the fact that it's auto-suggested when you try and use Svelte functions is just a real nuisance. And it's just kind of something that we've had to live with for a long time. Let's try a different one, like writable. So it's suggesting Svelte store here. When I tried this earlier today, it actually put svelte store.js. Like, why? Bizarre. It just does that kind of thing. All right, so let's say I've got my my writable, const count equals writable 0. I'm curious about how this function is implemented. I want to take a closer look. So I hold down the command key, and then when I hover on a function name, VS Code turns that into a link. And if I click on it, it takes me to this index.dts page where the signature is defined, which gives me some information. I mean, it basically just tells me what was already visible here in a much nicer way. But that's all its VS Code is capable of doing, because that's the only information it has. And you compare that to, if I have a module like this, and then I import that from my neighboring module, right? If I were to click on this here, it will take me to the code. It will take me to where that item is implemented, which is much more use. And I did a Twitter poll about this a couple of weeks ago, because I wasn't sure if I was the only person that was annoyed by this. Right. And the response was overwhelming. People absolutely hate the fact that you're taken here when you want to look at what a function is doing. So that is just a real nuisance. All right, now let's imagine that I want to add a transition to one of these elements. So we'll do transition : and I'm going to start typing fade, and we'll see if that gets auto imported. It doesn't. Fade is nowhere to be seen here, but what we do see is fix and destroy block from Svelte internal, which is like some rando implementation details that's
the transition I want.
What use is that? Absolutely none, because VS Code simply cannot find, for whatever reason, the Svelte transition package inside the Svelte poly package, right? Just extremely useless. So there is a PR open. Let me see if I can pull it up. In case people are curious and want to take a little look-see. The PR is here. So there's a library that I've been working on recently called DTS Buddy, because I couldn't think of a better name for it. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make sure that my local copy of Svelte is on the correct branch. Just working on a different monitor, just bear with me a sec. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to using a local copy of Svelte, pm link Svelte packages Svelte. And it's generating the types. I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff so that you can see it in action, get rid of that transition. And then I'm going to reload my VS Code window so that just TypeScript resets the world and everything. And then I'm going to try this once more. So let's begin with on mount. You can see it's just coming from Svelte. There's only the one option.
Oh, nice.
And if I command click on it, it's actually taking me to the implementation. In this case, it's not a very enlightening implementation, but there are some parts of the Svelte library where that's really useful, which we'll see in a second.
Yeah, like the stores, for example.
Yeah, so writable, again, Svelte store, we just import that, command click, takes you right to the implementation. Let's try the transition. Transition : fade. Svelte transition is visible.
Oh, nice.
And Svelte internal is nowhere to be seen. And this is one of the cases where being able to look at the implementation actually is kind of useful, because like if I want to create my own transition, it's useful to see how the built-in ones are implemented. And I no longer need to like figure out where the code lives on GitHub and like go to there. I can just command click and I can see the implementation right inside my node modules. And what's even cooler is that if I now go to my Vite config and make sure that Svelte is excluded from dependency optimization, then everything inside node modules / Svelte is going to be included live. It's not going to be pre-optimized, which means that I can start to edit the code as well. So let's just go inside here.
Oh, that's very nice.
Right. So let's do let visible equals false, and we'll add another checkbox. Type equals checkbox. Oops, need an equal sign. Bind checked equals visible. Let me get rid of the sidebar so that we can see this. And then if visible. Okay, so now see that happening.
Yep.
Right. Let's say I want to understand something about like what is this O value and what is the duration. Well, I can just put those out, and I see it in my app
so nice.
with hot module reloading and like all of the good stuff. Oh, and by the way, like, isn't it cool that I can now see what the default value of duration is? Because the type declarations don't give you that. So this is something that I think is going to make certainly my life a lot easier, because when I'm developing against this stuff, like it's really useful to be able to just go straight to the implementation that I'm developing. But I think this is going to be really nice for casual contributors and people who are just curious about how this stuff works, but also just the quality of life of having the correct auto imports and no longer seeing Svelte internal or Svelte types compile, like all of that random crap just appearing in your editor, no longer going to be the case. And how this works is that inside our Svelte package, DTS Buddy is creating one giant DTS file that contains everything using the declare module syntax. Declare module is great because it doesn't matter what TypeScript configuration you have. If you're using TypeScript 4, TypeScript 5, you're using module resolution bundler, if your editor is configured to use file extensions with every import or not, like all of that stuff doesn't matter because we're using declare module. And this means that VS Code and TypeScript understand that this is what's available. Yep. And everything in here is taken from the source code. Oops, that's a bit messy. I need to fix that. Is taken directly from the source code. So it's always going to be completely up to date. We're not like hand authoring DTS files that mirror the implementation details separately or anything like that. It's just creating these automatic bundles, and it's tree shaking them. It's not including all of the stuff that would normally be included if you just ran TSC over your source code. Because normally, if you look at the types directory of a typical NPM package, it contains a lot of internal implementation details that are just not relevant. So this is going to mean faster startup for TypeScript because it needs to do a lot less work to discover the types that are available, and a smaller package. And because we're also generating this source map, we're able to go to the implementations instead of to the type declarations. So this is something that I feel like has been a long time coming, and I just want to use this in every library that I build now.
Right. Yeah.
I want to polish it up a little bit and like try and get other library authors using this too, because it just seems like this is how things ought to be done.
Yeah. Someone in the chat said DTS. Does that stand for down to Svelte?
Down to Svelte. I love it. Yeah, so that's the type stuff. Pretty excited about that. There's one other thing. I know we've been waffling for a long time.
I've got time.
I always come to the devlog thinking, well, this will be like 20 minutes of
classic.
But yeah, I know. But I want to talk about the new website.
Yes,
because
let's do it.
It looks awesome. It's basically we're taking the design and the styles from kit.svelte.dev and learn.svelte.dev, and we're sort of backporting them to the original svelte.dev and bringing some pretty nice improvements along with it. So I'm gonna see if I can remember the. All right, so this is all work in progress. There's some details not done yet, but you can have a look at the preview here. This is the a labor of love of Peru, Vijay, who everyone knows Peru. Everyone
famous
knows Peru.
Sveltian. Go check
Yeah,
out his Svelte
he
Summit
of the
talks.
confetti. Yeah, it just done an absolutely unbelievable amount of work to get this buttoned up, and there's still more to do. We're not there yet, but it's looking fantastic. We have search on.
Do you want to maybe maximize the window?
Yeah, let's do that.
And take it all the way. Yeah.
So if you're looking for some specific API details, and you can go straight to the docs.
Oh, that's so nice.
Nice.
I've been wanting this forever.
Yeah, it's no longer one giant page of literally everything, which just a nightmare to deal with. So the docs look a lot like the kit.svelte.dev docs. We have an updated REPL here, which is using CodeMirror 6, which is so much nicer than CodeMirror 5. Like you get things like dual cursors, all that stuff.
Oh, so nice.
Yeah. We have dark mode.
Oh, that's a big one. That's the biggest feature.
Yeah, and there's a bunch more stuff to come there. So really excited about that. I think the plan is to try and get this shipped at the same time as Svelte 4. And so when I say that the migration guide is going to appear on the site, this is what I mean. It's going to be part of this right here.
Yep.
So I don't know if you could see someone creeping around in the background.
We could.
Sure. She'll love that. I completely lost my train of thought.
Migration onto the new website.
So new website. I just wanted to call out that obviously it's a ton of work and it's unreasonable to do it in half-hour free time slots here and there. So it's actually been made possible through the Open Collective, which is funding this work. So everyone who's contributed to the Open Collective, you're making this possible. Thank you, very much appreciated. Keep it coming.
Yeah.
And I think that's all the updates that I've got. Although I'm very happy to answer any questions that have been thrown up.
Yeah, let's see here. So Paolo is asking, can you repeat someone he wants to know the size of the confetti library? I think that's a question for Puri.
If I remember, it's like -4 kilobytes.
yeah. Your site shrinks when you add it.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone is asking a general question about JSDoc training. Like, where do you learn about JSDoc? Where did you learn about it? You just go to the JSDoc documentation website.
So it's this is the awkward reality of being a JSDoc proponent, is that documentation sucks. It's really bad. And if you just Google JSDoc and you go to the JSDoc site, then you'll be horribly misled, because what you actually want to look at is the TypeScript JSDoc documentation, and there's some subtle differences between JSDoc and TypeScript JSDoc. Basically, what I always tell people is the first thing you want to do is inside your TS config, add inside the compiler options, add allow.js true and check.js true, and then go to the TypeScript JSDoc documentation. Which, if you just Google TypeScript JSDoc, it'll take you to whatever the right page is, and then just like have a look at that syntax. And that's basically it. Eventually,
just
you'll come
learn
to a
by
point
doing.
where, yes, because there's not a whole lot on that page.
Yeah.
Once you understand how to type parameters of functions, and once you understand how to declare the type of a variable, and once you understand how to do type coercion, which is a little bit ugly, then you're 90% of the way there. Stuff like generics is a little bit gnarly. Eventually, you will probably need to have some stuff that is not inside your .js file, but is inside a manually authored DTS file that you can import from.
Yep.
But you might not even reach that point. I would love for there to be some better documentation. If I had infinite hours, then I would write it myself. Fortunately, I do not.
Yeah,
but it's a good thing to call out because the documentation is lacking. But just like do it. If you get stuck, holler at me on Twitter or Discord or whatever, and I'll see if I can help. But yeah,
I remember going to that JS documentation site. I was like, oh no, this is not for me. It's like it feels like it's the same. You know, when you go to the HTML spec, it kind of feels the same thing, like same feeling.
Yeah.
So a couple of more questions here. Is it safe to use Svelte at Next today?
I think so. Yeah. I think it's safe.
So it's not version Next 0 like SvelteKit version Next 0, right? Like
no.
It's more like a beta version. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe there'll be a next one and a next 2, but I think we're pretty close to stable. Yeah, there's really not a lot of changes. We would certainly appreciate people trying it out and then letting us know if there's stuff missing or broken.
Yep.
But I don't think we're going to have to wait long to be able to use it for real.
Awesome.
And then
are we talking
Svelte 5?
Yeah, I was going to say.
Let's not get into that right now.
Yeah. Okay. Because there is a question on Svelte 5 in here.
Of course there is.
So should we, or should we save it for another?
Let's just say that work has begun on Svelte 5.
Yep.
A lot of you know that Dominic Ganaway joined the Svelte team a while back. And so while the old hands have been working on Svelte 4, Dominic has been living in the future, trying out some ideas for Svelte 5. It's really exciting.
Nothing to share yet?
Nothing to share yet.
Okay.
But it's going to be good.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. And I guess with that, we're done for the month. Thanks everyone for joining and watching Rich do his awesome demos. And maybe we'll see you next month. I know I'll schedule a devlog at least. I don't know if you'll be there.
I will not be there. I will be elsewhere.
All right. Then we'll find one of the other core maintainers who might want to hop in and show us what's been going on in June. All right. And I think that's it. Right. Bye, everyone.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.